Welcome to today's program, in which we'll step outside of the rigorous, evidence-based inquiry that is typical of research in the 9/11 truth movement and delve into concepts that have been neither proven nor disproven, but that kindle the imagination and are worthy of exploring in our ongoing efforts to build a more peaceful world. My name is Marilyn Langlois, and I serve on the board of directors of the International Center for 9/11 Justice. Our organization is dedicated to establishing an accurate account of the 9/11 events and to fostering a global realization and reckoning about the causes of this world-changing crime against humanity. We envision a world that puts an end to the immoral and destructive policies enacted after 9/11 and that lives up to the principles of peace, justice, freedom, and true democratic governance. Recognizing that the crimes of 9/11 were used by the United States as a justification to launch unspeakable violence and suffering through the unending war on terror, and that the United States government was complicit in covering up the identity of and giving impunity to the actual perpetrators. One of our more far-reaching areas of inquiry is imagining a more positive future, one where crimes and deceptions of this magnitude are no longer possible. The late, great David Ray Griffin, preeminent researcher in the 9/11 truth movement, was also a theologian who spent much of his career studying consciousness, freedom, and the mind-body problem. He was convinced that people with an expanded idea of consciousness have the curiosity and humility it takes to look deeper and question established narratives that don't fit the evidence. In 2023, the International Center for 9/11 Justice established an annual lecture in honor of David Ray Griffin. And we have with us today our first two David Ray Griffin lecturers, Daniele Ganser and Madhava Setty. Both are courageous scholars and thinkers who will bring together the fields of science, medicine, history, peace research, and philosophy of knowledge to explore the mind-body question as a potential pathway to peace. Dr. Daniele Ganser is currently a freelance historian, lecturer, author, and peace researcher based in Switzerland. He left his position at a prominent Swiss university in 2006 when he declined to recant his op-ed in a mainstream newspaper expressing the likelihood that World Trade Center Building 7 was destroyed by controlled demolition. His most recent book, USA, The Ruthless Empire, places the crimes of 9/11 into the broader context of a warmongering, imperialistic agenda being pursued by the United States for over a century. Welcome, Daniele.
Hello, Marilyn. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Dr. Madhava Setty is a board-certified anesthesiologist practicing in Boston for the past 20 years. Prior to that, he worked as an engineer in the aerospace industry. He is the author of the book, Woke, An Anesthesiologist's View, which examines the bias in science, history, media, and our own minds. He began questioning the official narrative of 9/11 in 2017 after seeing a video clip of the destruction of World Trade Center Building 7. He subsequently questioned the official COVID narrative and has since been a vocal advocate for unpacking the truth and cutting through the propaganda. He is currently science advisor to the International Center for 9/11 Justice. Welcome, Madhava.
Thank you, Marilyn. And it's great to be with both of you.
Great.
Danielle?
Thank you. Thank you. The relevance of our conversation today is vital, given the intensifying divisions we are witnessing in our country and the world. Both the current and previous United States presidents have been extremely divisive and polarizing in their rhetoric, each resonating with different sectors of the population and encouraging them to demonize the other, which signals to me that both ultimately serve the interests of global financial and increasingly technocratic elites who aim to control the rest of us and who view people as programmable machines devoid of a soul or conscience. Both Madhava Setty and Daniele Ganser have expressed the importance of people rising above the divisions imposed on us, finding unity and recognizing our common humanity in order to forge solutions that will actually offer a dignified life to everyone. Daniele, you often speak about your three core principles of nonviolence, mindfulness, and the human family, and I'll ask you to elaborate more on that momentarily. Madhava, towards the end of your David Ray Griffin lecture this past December, you noted that we're currently seeing a growth of independent thought outside of hierarchical control, but that the nefarious forces who have been in charge for the last 2,000 or so years will try to use this shift to their advantage and keep us divided by convincing us that the barriers between us are insurmountable, that conflict brings unavoidable violence and war is necessary. You suggested that a major discovery of our time could be to show that war is not necessary and peace is possible, that we're not inherently separate and incapable of uniting, that what we all have in common is our awareness and consciousness, that if we truly envision a more positive future, we can achieve it. Madhava, I'll start with you and ask you to expand a little on how our thinking about awareness and consciousness can play a role in building peace.
Well, thank you for that flattering introduction, Marilyn. And I want to start by saying, Daniela, it's an honor to be here with you as someone who's recanted or being unwilling to recant, to stick to your ideals and principles against that kind of attack. I bow to you and your willingness to stand up for what you believe in, and we certainly need more of that today. So it's an honor to be with both of you. Well, I love the introduction, Marilyn. I love how you summarized my commentary from last year in December. I didn't realize I did such a good job. That was an excellent summary, But your question is around awareness and how that is the fundamental concept that we have to consider as we approach the world today. The reality is that we have this illusion of separation. That's the first one. And the second is we are generally very, very kind, good, and generous people. However, our tendency to do the right thing can be used against us. And I think we saw this very clearly with the pandemic and the impositions and mandates that were placed upon us. And we were told that that was the right thing to do. And if you really want to consider things in a energetic perspective, there are many systems of thought, at least from the East, that place a certain hierarchy in how we are actually put together as conscious beings. We're not simply awareness. We have certain predilections, and we have energy centers in our body, if you will, that deal first with the need to survive, and then the need to be able to communicate and interact on a social level, and then the ability we have to love and to know, and then to balance things. And all of this has been mapped out before. But what I want to point out here is that at least in these systems, the wisdom part of us, whatever you want to call that, sits above our heart center in at least Eastern philosophical thought in terms of our chakra systems. And the reason why I bring that up, because it has relevance to what I'm saying right now, which is good people who want to love and want to connect can be manipulated to do the wrong thing by very, very wily ways of controlling the way we think. And in the end, if we really want true solutions on the planet, we have to come together, as you mentioned. And awareness is the place where we all can connect We all are aware. There's no question about that. That is possibly one of the few things that we know to be true, no matter who you are, where you are, or what you're experiencing. And interestingly, once you start examining that, you start walking into the kinds of problems that David Ray Griffin wrote about, as you said, with the mind-body problem, which is a challenge for all philosophers, and I would say for neuroscientists as well. And so that's where it all leads. And I'm going to stop there. And why don't you tell me where you want me to go with that? Because I believe that was the essence of what you're asking.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madhava. Daniele, I'd like you to react a little bit to what he said. And to just add a little bit of context, I want to refer to a lecture you gave in German to your online community about the concept of unconscious assumptions. And the fact that not only do good people often get manipulated into doing not very good things, but the messages that we're constantly bombarded with, often these messages become internalized, and we believe that thought is inextricably tied to our identity. So if somebody challenges that thought, we immediately reject it. And yet, if you can realize that those thoughts are with you, but they're not part of you, you're more able to take in new information and modify your thoughts. Anyways, take it from there, Daniele.
Yes, thank you very much, Marilyn. First for your kind words, and Madhava, I really enjoyed your talk, so it's an honor for me to be part of this group. And I think this point that Madhava just made, that everybody is aware that he is here. Like, we are now having this conversation, and people who are watching us, they are aware that somehow they're here. So I fully agree with Madhava that it all starts with this insight that we're somehow here. And it's maybe hard to say where we are. Everybody would say, well, I'm not in my little finger, and I'm not in my leg. I'm rather around my head, maybe here or here where my chest is, or I'm somehow here all the time. And this concept of awareness that Madhava so eloquently elaborated is really something that interests me a lot, because people who've had near-death experiences, then I read books from Raymond Moody and others. They say that they see the body from outside, and still they're there, but they're not in the body anymore. And I think for us in the 9/11 Truth movement, it is very important to come to this position of spiritual power. Like we are scientists. We want to find out what is the truth about World Trade Center 7, for instance. And we've, had many years where we just spoke about, the collapse of World Trade Center 7 and how it was brought down through controlled demolition. But if we stay there, I think we stay on a level of fear. And it is important to move beyond that spot of fear and go to the spot of awareness. Because once we realize that we can be in this spot of awareness, then there's no reason to be afraid, because I'm personally convinced that the awareness is our true identity. It's not our body. It's not our thoughts. It's not our feelings. They come and go. The body comes at birth and you leave it at death. But the awareness or the consciousness or the soul, there are many different names that you can give to it. But I think if the peace movement is really to be strong in the 21st century, it has to reach this level that Madhava indicates always. And I fully agree with you, Madhava. If either we go to this level or we're stuck in fear and divisions, because the way I see it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, is that awareness is universally connected and it cannot be destroyed. And if that is true, then there's no reason for fear.
Couldn't have said it better myself, sir. Yes, fear is the ultimate way of controlling people, and we have to at least be able to acknowledge that if we have a population that is fearless, they become extremely, extremely hard to control.
Yeah.
And right away, we now can introduce the idea that perhaps there has been a programming of people at a very, very broad level for a very long time to keep us in fear. I mean, we hear it all the time, almost without even questioning. We hear, oh, well, you only live once. What does that mean, really? Do we really only live once? I mean, where did that come from? Are you sure? Because that's a pretty big statement. And I love what you said about consciousness and awareness being universal. I would tend to agree with you. Absolutely. Some of the stuff that I've been really working on and writing about and thinking about has to do with the barriers we have to looking at things clearly. And there are many of them, and they're coming from our side as well, and the 9/11 truth movement. For example, when we say, oh, here's the truth, I never say that because, as scientists, we know that the truth is out there, but we're never going to get there. Because the reality is, if you begin with the axiom that everything is connected, in order to know everything about something, you have to know everything about everything. And that's impossible. And we, as scientists, when we're true to our credo, we recognize the uncertainty in our positions. I mean, scientists expect when they come up with a new finding, they realize it's going to be overturned at some point because we simply do not know everything about everything. And so, I would say that what we've been missing in the scientific community is a sense of humility. And it always comes right down. I have the strange opportunity in this lifetime right now to be an anesthesiologist. And what's fascinating about this field of medicine is that it is representative of the greatest, in my mind, contribution of Western medicine to humanity. And it also possesses the greatest mystery in Western medicine, which is we don't know how these gases work. And, the reality is that the reason why we don't know how they work is that we're looking at it incorrectly. So, Danielle, you mentioned the general experience recounted by people who have near-death experiences.
Yeah,
Which is
I never had one. I never had one myself. It's just from reading books.
Yes, and I've spoken to people who've had them before, and the
Oh, okay.
important point there is that consciousness is non-local. There's no way to explain how that could possibly be happening when you have someone, and this has been documented by thousands of cases of resuscitation in hospitals, where a subset of people have a very distinct memory of what was done to them. And there's no way to explain this in Western medicine's philosophical view of materialism, where the body is giving rise to consciousness. So right away, we have an enormous exception, right? Which means that the theory is wrong. Our entire hypothesis that everything is resulting from biochemical reactions between molecules, it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the most important things.
Yeah.
And the reality is that how do we get people to look at this openly without bias? And this is where 9/11, the event itself, I think, is so unbelievably important, because unlike any other events in my lifetime, it offers very very big threads that can be pulled on. Because in the history of, let's say, false flags, and I really enjoyed your talk from the inaugural David Ray Griffin lecture. There are many false flags, but most of us weren't around for World War II, and very few of us were adults when JFK was assassinated. And Vietnam veterans are on their way out, sadly. But 9/11, a lot of us were adults back then, and in contrast to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's very, very difficult to understand what happened there. And people don't necessarily have the capacity to understand how data has been manipulated and how we did the wrong things. People are very, very reluctant to challenge the medical orthodoxy if they're not physicians. But with 9/11, it is right there in your face. It is absolutely uncontestable that what we were told was wrong.
Yeah.
And and as we run down these paths trying to hold people accountable, what is the big lesson here? The big lesson, in my opinion, is that the media is lying, and the media controls the way we think collectively. And once
Yes.
we can, come to that conclusion, now we can actually use it to pull apart the illusion that we've been under for a very, very long time. The media is complicit. And once the media is complicit, now we have a massive, massive problem, because we have nothing to hold tyranny accountable, because that is the fundamental role of a free and independent press, and we don't have that. And we don't have that in this country. And this is why the 9/11 topic is so very, very important as we apprehend what happens in the planet around us right now. I just said a lot. I can talk for a long time. Marilyn, anything you want to
Yeah.
jump in there with, or Daniela?
Yeah, no, I think that you've made some really important points, Madhava, about the media. And I keep wondering too, I've been involved with 9/11 research for many, many years. And to me, it's very obvious. It's obvious that all three buildings at World Trade Center were demolished. It was a planned demolition. The way it's just, when you look at the video footage, it seems obvious even to a layperson, and of course scientists. Many scientists have provided proof that this has got to be the case. And it just reminds me of the story of the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah.
There's because of all of these media messages, it seems that people are just unable to look at that and see, like you say, see the obvious. Just like in the fairy tale, the emperor walked down the avenue naked, and everybody thought he was dressed in finery. But added to that component of that fairy tale, we have to remember, part of it was that the proclamation was made that only those who are truly worthy will be able to see the emperor's clothes, and anyone who is unworthy will not. And we, of course, get that added component. If you believe this fairy tale we're telling you about, 19 guys who can't fly planes and just use a few box cutters and committing this, incredibly spectacular crime, you have to believe that. If you don't, you're not a worthy person. So, Daniele, does that play a role, do you think, in the resistance people have to actually opening their eyes to what's going on?
Oh, absolutely, Marilyn. Absolutely. I mean, people, the way I see it, as a historian based here in Switzerland, people try to stay in the big group. Maybe that's from thousands of years ago, where we just had to stay in our tribe to survive. Somebody who left the tribe probably died because he couldn't find enough food and survive the winter. So there's probably a deep instinct to just stay in the group. And if the group is just telling stupid things, you just stay in the group. You say, yeah, sure, that I believe that too. What was it? I mean, whatever it is, I believe it. I want to be in the group. But now, as we evolve into the 21st century, I have made this experience, and maybe that elaborates on what also Madhava said, is that with 9/11, we have a really unique opportunity to see that we're being deceived. And maybe on one hand, it's shocking and it's sad because nobody wants to see that he's being deceived. On the other hand, it can be a very healthy shock, to wake up. And it's true. I agree with Madhva that, the lies of the Gulf of Tonkin, or the lies of Pearl Harbor, or the lies of Operation Gladio, they are interesting for historians like me, but nobody really experienced them in the sense that he remembers the day they happened, because they are long gone. But with 9/11, we are now a group of people, and that's, we're in the millions, who remember where they were on September 11, 2001, and who want to find out what happened. And I agree with you, Marilyn, that we were lied to. I mean, we all three agree on that point. But what does it mean then? It leads me to this insight of Professor Noam Chomsky, who once wrote this book about manufacturing consent, that the media can just, control the story. They can say, Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden did it, and therefore we have to fight in Afghanistan. And we realized that this is the story that was told. And we realized that then the story was told we have to attack Iraq. Why? Because Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Okay. And, then there was this other war. And then, and maybe Madhava, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about that one. I had the feeling that in that period when it was just Afghanistan, 9/11, and Iraq, there was maybe a small group of people who said the media is not giving a fair description of what's actually going on. And then in 2020, with the pandemic, more people, especially those who didn't want to get vaccinated. I didn't want to get vaccinated. I said, I don't trust that. I don't trust what you're doing, what you're telling me. And in Switzerland, it's 30% who didn't get the vaccination. And I'm in this group. And this group is extremely open. I really have to say, not a little bit open. They are extremely open when I tell them, and you know what? On Iraq and the ABC weapons, that was a lie. And on 9/11, that was a lie. They're like, yeah, right. I didn't realize then, but now I'm interested in my own thoughts. I'm interested to observe my thoughts and to come to the realization that some things that I was thinking were just propaganda elements that the government through the media put into my head. So what I want to say, the point I want to go to is more and more people are now observing their own thoughts, and they break free from a total identification with their thoughts, which I think is a crucial process, because then you can say, there are some thoughts in my head. What am I thinking right now? Is it the truth? Not sure. It's an interesting thought, but it's a playful attitude. And when you explained that it is very important to remember that everything is interconnected, and on no thing we can know the total story, that means that we come back to a position of humility. And I fully agree with you, Madhva, because this dogmatic position of we have to attack Afghanistan, we have to vaccinate everybody, and you have to stay at home, and if the kids go to school, they will all die. They have to stay at home. That's all madness. For me, it's all madness. And so I have this feeling, and I want to maybe end on that positive perspective, that I think within the last 25 years, I'm now 52, but the last 25 years that I've seen, our group has become bigger and bigger and bigger. There's more and more and more people who say, I realize that switching off the television is maybe a good idea. Or I realize that what I read in the newspaper is just a story that they put into my head, and I'm not buying it anymore. So my feeling is there is a change of consciousness globally going on. That's my feeling. I don't know how you see it on the other side of the Atlantic.
Yes, I absolutely see it. I think we all see it. And it's interesting, like, there's our group, which is very, very excited about this change. And then for every one of us, there's 10 people out there that are freaked out that, people are losing their minds, when in fact we're actually gaining our minds, or, gaining sanity, I would say. I would like to say something about, Marilyn, what you brought up with the Emperor's New Clothes. And you said something very, very important, which had to do with the introduction of the idea that only the worthy will see the truth. And I'm going to contextualize first by saying our objective here, obviously, is to get more people to consider their thoughts objectively. The idea is to invite them to look harder at what we're being told, because that's the way through. So, the question that I always pose to people, whether it's about 9/11 or especially with COVID, is most people are not experts in their field, let alone the field of virology, let's say. And my question always is how do you know which expert to agree with? Who's telling the truth? So if we consider this properly, if we're being completely objective as a layperson who is not an expert, we would have to concede that we cannot know who's right. We absolutely can't, because that's what differentiates us from the experts. They know more than we. So how do we know which one to believe, right? And where this brings us to is the understanding that both sides of, say, the vaccine issue, let's say, are saying that the other side is wrong, and you have to listen to us, not them. And both sides, let's say, they know more than you. So we're stuck. They look like mirror images of each other. How do we differentiate the two? Well, we can't base it on their arguments, because we can't actually understand which argument is more valid, because we're lay people, so we're stuck. However, there are some very important differences. The biggest difference is that one side is asking for a debate, an open debate with the other side. And the other side is saying that's just going to be a mistake. We should never, ever have a debate, because then you're going to get the wrong idea. Obviously, that doesn't mean that they're wrong, but we should be able to jump immediately to the conclusion that if the side that doesn't want to debate, that the side that does not want to have a debate, how would they ever know they're wrong? So we are now confronted with the reality that they could be right, but they could be wrong. And if they were wrong, they would never know it. So that's a very, very big concern. But the point that I want to bring up, and this is where I want to allude to what you said, Marilyn, was that one side very often will say, look, the reason why those smart people over there that disagree with us, you know what their real intent is? They're snake oil salesmen. They have another they have a hidden agenda to acquire wealth, and they're trying to fool you, because that's their real intent. I know they sound smart, but their real intent is to mess with you, because they want to make some money on the side, and they want to push. They're not looking out for your best interest. Now, here's the thing, is when you are confronted with a complicated, let's say, analysis of the data coming from one side, most people really cannot grasp it, right? They can't understand why that argument is better than the other argument, but they can very, very easily relate to, oh yeah, I can understand why they would do that. It's money involved. I can totally understand why their conflict of interest would push them towards, the wrong way. They're manipulating us. People can relate to that. And this is a very, very pernicious trick used by not only, let's say, the medical establishment, or with regard to 9/11, these guys are conspiracy theorists. Those guys are, they're anti-vaxxers. I mean, they're crazy to begin with. Notice that the same thing happens in religious doctrines. How do you identify the false prophets? Well, they disagree with us. And we're telling you in advance that that's their intent. Their intent is to mess with you. And now you have, crystallized this idea that, oh, they told us that the other side was up to no good, and they're telling us exactly what we're predicting, that they're going to disagree with us for those reasons. And that does what? That brings us into dogma, because we're never going to talk ourselves out of it, because we feel once we start believing that they're up to no good, doesn't matter what their argument is, now we've already, rejected their opinion, and now we're stuck. And this is something that I think is very important to bring to our audience right now, is that we can't use that on our side. We obviously, they're up to no good, but most of the people who are spokespeople for, let's say, the, conventional story behind COVID, or COVID origins, or 9/11, they're not like psychopathic. They really aren't. Doctors aren't trying to kill people, they're just going along with the herd. Their herd says
Yeah.
that this is the right thing to do. But once we start saying, oh, they're all, sociopaths, we're falling into a low vibrational state when we do that. Because our side should be like, look, I'm not going to make any accusations about their character. Let's not go there. I just want to talk about the facts. I just want to talk about the science, and let it stand on its own. Because that way we will be arguing for our point from a high vibrational perspective. It's no personal attacks. There's no impugning their character. It's, let's just talk about the facts. And Danielle, you were saying exactly right. There is an awakening. People are moving over to clarity, let's say, and it's a irrepressible movement, because the truth is not. It can't be. It takes so much energy to hide the truth. So entropy says we're going to win.
Fortunately,
Yes,
fortunately, it takes so much energy to hide the truth.
it
World
takes a
Trade Center
lot of
7
energy.
is not going to go away.
It can't go away. And every time, let's say, they pull some stunt like 9/11 or the pandemic, they are giving us a tell. They're showing us what they're doing. And so they take a risk every time they try to manipulate the way we think, because no matter how hard they try, there's going to be a few of us that will say, "Whoa, wait a minute, no, that's not gonna fly with me." And it takes the courage of people like all of us here to stand up and say, I'm not gonna buy it, and it doesn't matter. And this is where consciousness is so important, because what do we have to fear? Public rebuke? Who cares? I don't care. They're not going to kill me, and there are worse things than dying. So all of this stuff is connected, and in order to bring people to clarity, we have to approach it at a very, very deep level, and this is where it all becomes intertwined.
Thank you for that, all of that, Madhava. I really appreciate your pointing out how futile it actually is for people to get entrenched in their positions and say, we're right, you're wrong. And even though we believe maybe our conclusions are the correct ones, to just point fingers at others and demonize them and criticize them is fruitless. So how do we find a way to exchange and to invite people to look at different perspectives? And for this, Daniele, I want you to address a couple of your concepts. Your principle of mindfulness, obviously, we've talked about that a lot already, but your principle about the human family, as we view everyone as a fellow member of the family. Family members often have different ideas about things, but can you tell us how we can use that concept to have more fruitful dialogue about exploring these really difficult issues?
Yeah, thank you, Marilyn. I mean, you and me, we've talked about this already a few times in the community, and this principle of human family means that we're now 8 billion people in 193 countries. So you, Marilyn, and Madhava, you're now in the US. I'm in Switzerland. Other people who are listening are maybe in Brazil or in Denmark or in Canada, who knows? And so we're in different nations. That's an obvious thing. And the nation state can split us into different identities, like the Russians and the Ukrainians. They don't have the same flag, so they fight each other. And the soldiers would wear just different colors, uniforms, or the Germans and the French in the First World War. That was just a national divide. Or we can be split with through nations, but we can also be split through religions. For instance, the Jews and the Muslims in the ongoing fight between the Palestinians and Israel right now, or the religious fights now in Syria between the Alawites and the Sunnis. So we can be split through nations, religions, then gender, man against female, or age, the young against the old, or the old against the young. Or we can be split according to wealth classes, the poor against the rich, or the rich against the poor. So once you study history, you see that's always coming again and again. this divide or that divide, and these divides can be very, very strong. And then when I was researching war propaganda, I came to this conclusion that, hey, that's all an illusion. Actually, we're all, as Madhava also said, we're consciousness. We're consciousness. We are in this body, but actually we're all the same consciousness. And that means we're all part of the same human family. So Marilyn, when I look into your eyes and you look into my eyes, it's basically the same consciousness looking at itself through different bodies. That's the way I see it. And when you see it that way, then you realize that we can, if we approach world affairs from this concept of human family, then we come exactly to that point that Madhava just said, that we treat others with respect because we are them. It doesn't matter whether they are vaccinated or not vaccinated, whether they think President Bush told us the truth about 9/11, or whether they think we were lied to about 9/11. Like we think, we were lied to about 9/11. But it doesn't matter what specific thought you have, because whatever thought you have, consciousness is on a higher level. The thoughts are down here for me. I just explained how I see it. And we have, a lot of different thoughts. But if we remember that we're actually connected, all of us are connected on a very profound level of consciousness, then I think peace can prevail. I really think so. I mean, some people say, Daniele, are you crazy? It's impossible. We're so divided. We have to kill the bad guys first, and then peace can prevail. Then I always say, well, who are the bad guys? And then you talk to the different groups, and they always say, the other ones are the bad guys. And then if you do a strategic analysis, you get, oh, gee, if we have to kill all the bad guys, and if you see that all groups see the bad guys in the other groups, then you have endless killing. There's no end. There's no end. It's not that everybody agrees. There's one bad guy, we kill it, and then we have a good world. And so we get to step out of this way of thinking. Because if I look at war propaganda, it was like, we have to kill Osama bin Laden, then the world will be safe. Well, okay, he was dead. What happened next? Now we have to overthrow Gaddafi. We have to kill Gaddafi. Then the world will be safe. Okay, now he's overthrown. He's dead. Then what's next? Oh, Putin. It's always, let's kill the bad guy. And this is just a story which doesn't make any sense. If we would take a different story, if we would start from a different narrative, and that's this idea, Marilyn. I know that you know it already, but thanks that you gave me the chance to elaborate on this idea of human family. It really means, and I've seen it, mentioned by many different thinkers. It's not that I have invented it. It's always been there in the tradition of thought, that we're all connected on a very, very profound level, and that actually both our friends, and that's the important part, and our enemies are part of the human family. And if we work on this level, and I think it's a truth, I obviously listener can make up their own mind. I have friends who say, Dan, I really love your concept. My wife is human family. My kids are human family. You are human family. But there are some assholes out there and they're not part of the human family. Then I tell them, no, wait, that's not my concept. Those that you think that you don't like them, especially them, they're part of the human family as well. Everybody. And they say, are you kidding? And I say, yeah, to really nail it down, Gandhi is part of the human family. Then they say, oh yeah, Gandhi. Yeah, he's a great man. I mean, am I on his level? Okay, if you say so, okay. But then I say, and Hitler is also part of the human family. They go like, you can't be telling me the truth. Hitler and Gandhi in the same family? You're going to the opposites and you're putting them together. And I say, yeah, but that's the point. Like, you cannot exclude one person. I mean, if somebody's listening now and he's maybe a murderer, he's maybe killed somebody or raped somebody or done something very evil, he's still part of the human family. And and I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. I think that we are all part of this interconnected consciousness. And when Madhava gave his talk, and Madhava, it has to be said, we never met in person, but I was like, he thinks the same way as I do. You have to now say whether it's true, but I had this feeling. And Marilyn, the same with you. We never met in person, but I also had this feeling of Marilyn, she thinks the same way like that. So we're already a few, but maybe I'm just making assumptions that you see it the same way. But this concept of human family, I think it's out there, and many people, spiritual people, or don't yogis, or I don't know how you want to call the group, they understand that there's a fundamental truth on it. Is Marilyn, do you see it like that as well, or am I putting something into your mind?
I just want to jump in and then Madhava give you a chance to react. That's so wise, Daniele. I love the way you present that and elaborate on the concept. And it just reminds me of the importance of, when you mentioned examples of Gandhi and Hitler, how important it is to not equate the individual, the person, the deeper person, with their actions and their behaviors, because there are behaviors that are pretty awful, and many people.
Yeah, the behavior, yes, the behavior.
Commit behaviors, but the inner core of that person, everyone, I agree, has that inner divine spark within them that connects us all. And
yeah, it's this, it's this: make the hate the sin, but love the sinner.
Right. And then we can talk for hours on what is it that drives some people to do terrible things, and that's another conversation. But Madhava, I want you to react to what Daniele said about the human family.
I love it, man. You nailed it. I could go on for a lot about what you just said. I'm going to take it a little bit deeper, which is, in my opinion, we're living in a reality that has both light and shadow. It is unavoidable. One only has to look to the skies, and we see the moon and the sun. And the moon is illuminated by the sun. It cannot self-illuminate. However, the sun cannot create a shadow. So the light and the dark are part of this reality. And I think that we run into a massive problem when we start to say that we can eliminate evil, like you were mentioning, Danielle. Like we have to kill all the bad guys, whether it's Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or Dick Cheney, whoever. The reality is that they're serving an enormous purpose in our own spiritual development. Because without them, where is the conflict? Without them, where is the controversy? How do we hone our own spiritual development without these players? So we run into a problem, in my mind, when we say we want accountability or we want to punish. Because right away, and this is alluding to what you're saying about how we're being, fractured by so many different standards, by flags, by religion, by gender, by age. As soon as we say we need to hold people accountable or punish them, some people's idea of what is just is completely different from another person's idea of what is just, and already now we're fragmenting again. It's like I don't agree with you. That person does not, deserve the death penalty. That person. So we keep fragmenting into different opinions about what should be done. And so that's a mistake. Like I'm saying, I'm not saying that we genuflect to the evil. I'm saying, decide what is important to you and refuse to recant when necessary. Stand strong. Don't comply when you feel like it doesn't resonate with your belief system. However, extinguishing the shadow, if you will, is not really what our goal is here. Our goal is to dance with the shadow and create something beautiful in this march towards more and more clarity. The next thing I wanted to say was we've evolved, I think, despite the fact that, it seems like we're less and less connected and we're stuck to our phones, I think we can make the argument that shadow and light has always been on this planet. And it wasn't so long ago that the shadow would physically imprison the light, if you will, or the innocent. And that inherently was an unstable situation that would always result in violence, like a violent overthrow. And so if we consider light and shadow to be freedom versus control, freedom being the light, this dance has always appeared on the planet. And in the past, it was, the hierarchical system, the ruling class that would literally subjugate the masses to a horrible way of living. And we've come a long way from there. And I'm not saying that it doesn't exist in some parts of the world. It certainly does. But we're no longer dealing with a physical battle. We are now into the realm of thought forms. Like, we're being controlled, not necessarily physically, but by the way we think. And
Yes.
the battle right now is, how do you be a warrior in the realm of thought? And lucky for me, as someone who's 5'7" and 145 pounds, I don't have to fight with my fists. I can fight with my pen. And my goal is to make us better communicators, and to notice the fact that when we're seeking to get rid of all the bad people, we're off track. We're not going to get rid of the bad people. They're here for a reason. That being said, I wanted to let me stop right there before I continue to wax on about other things.
Daniele, did you want to chime in? I do have a question for you both. I think it's important also, for when we're talking about consciousness, for people to remember that each one of us possesses an asset that is incredibly valuable to those who would want to control us and make money off us and manipulate us and use us. And that asset is our attention span.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
because our attention span in this world of, smartphones and computers and media and internet is constantly being monetized. And that's the prize. That's what they want, to maximize the amount of human attention span they can amass and then control it to further their agenda. And, I thought about this when my 4-year-old granddaughter was constantly interrupting when I was trying to talk about something with my daughter, her mother. And I said, look, Zora, let me just finish talking with your mom, and then I will give you my undivided attention. And she wasn't aware of that concept. So she learned a new concept, undivided attention. We know that small children demand our attention span, and we give it usually willingly to them. And we give our attention span to, friends and family. But how can people be more conscious of what they do with that attention span? We can throw it away by just turning on the TV and letting it play whatever, or just mindlessly rolling through YouTube videos that are on random topics, or listening to people who just go on and on and on and on and on and say the same thing over and over again. So what are some ideas you have about how each individual can utilize, can sort of be stewards of their own very valuable asset, namely attention span, in guiding it to more constructive and fruitful ways?
I mean, that's what they call engaged minutes, right? At YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and stuff. They want to have more engaged minutes, because once you have more engaged minutes, you can, put more advertisement in, and they know how to get the more engaged minutes, because the algorithm really knows whether you like Ferrari, or whether you're into permaculture, or whether you are into whatever it is, football or hockey, and they just bring you the same stories that you like, that you crave, just to get the engaged minutes. And Marilyn, the question is very good. And what I personally do is, first of all, I read books, paper books. that takes me out of the algorithm. I read a book and there's no hyperlink with it in it, and I'm maybe that's my age. Okay, I'm 52. I like a paper book, and I like to write in it, and with a marker I put questions or I put notes and dates and names. It's a training, just to read 100 pages and stay with one topic, and that's something I can maybe advise if people say how can I train my attention. Read 100 pages and stick with it. Don't get sidetracked, switch off your phone, don't talk, just do this, nothing else, focus on that and nothing else. And the next thing that I also do, and I think more and more people do it, offline, in nature, like they go into nature to recalibrate the system. Just sit at the lake without your smartphone, without your laptop. The idea is to be offline. It's not to sit at the lake and post, I'm at the lake. Okay. It's more, yeah, you can do it if you want. But basically, the way I suggest is that just to be with yourself. And it's the hardest thing, I think
Yeah,
most people,
especially for me.
yeah, it's just most people are constantly taking in information, and
Yeah,
to just be with yourself in nature and sit there and feel how you're breathing and see what's happening. Some people think it's boring. Other people say it's painful because then there are thoughts coming up from experiences they didn't like, so they'd rather read on their phone about a plane crash. But it's the two things that I think are very important. And the third thing I dare to say is really choose wisely when you take a YouTube channel. What are people talking about? And I maybe that helps me to do that bridge. I really liked what Madhava said about this dance with the shadow. The way I see it is that we live in this polarity. Is that what you meant? We live in this polarity, and the polarity is never going to go away. Okay, and I think more and more people realize this. So if that is the fact of the universe, that's the way it's built, then we
hmm
cannot eradicate evil, or we cannot eradicate love. It's always going to be there.
hmm
And to take it one level further, I'd like to come back to what you said in your lecture, Madhva, that you believe in reincarnation, that the soul comes many times and is in different bodies. So maybe in one time, you are the killer, and in
Yep.
another reincarnation you're the one who's being killed. And if I understand you correctly, and I'd love to hear more from you on that thought, um, both incarnations are all right in the sense of they are an experience, and once you have to take on this role, once you have to take on that role, and the universe itself will look after justice. It's not you. You have to look after justice and make sure that Dick Cheney or Donald Rumsfeld or whoever, we don't have, in the peace movement, we don't have to run after people and tell them what to think or how they have to behave. We
hmm
rather have to maybe talk about the larger picture. And that's why I like this talk, Marilyn, today, because usually we just talk about World Trade Center 7, about the Gulf of Tonkin. We talk about all history facts, right? And this is more like a philosophical exchange of thoughts, very open. And thanks, Marilyn, that you made this possible. And Madhava, if you feel like to make a few more comments on reincarnation, why is that a thought that is important for you in this conversation? It seems far-fetched. People go like, they're talking about 9/11, and then they're talking about reincarnation. They're
Yeah.
talking about they're talking about everything. Why? But
Yeah.
I'm interested in that.
Me too. I want to answer that first and remind me that I want to go back to what Marilyn said about attention. So, look, Are we reincarnating? I don't know. Nobody knows. We can't know. There's no, we can't measure it. We have some pretty convincing evidence that we are reincarnating, coming from the mouths of thousands of kids who have been reunited with the families from which they deceased. And they can identify everybody there. And we have no explanation as to why that is, other than the fact that they were there. Some, part of their essence was there in the past. And it's a very, very difficult thorn in the side of, conventional thinkers to acknowledge that, which is why they don't. And they just, they use the age-old strategy to say that anybody who believes that is really not scientific. And then and then you've excluded them from, serious consideration for everything else they say. Now, the reality here is that, okay, we don't know, but what if we just pretended that we do? What would we do next? I mean, everything would be solved, honestly, if we sort of, adhered to that and moved forward with the fact that, oh, we're all reincarnating. And as you said, Danielle, we don't know who's more culpable today, because we could have been the horrific psychopath that lived 50 years ago. So how do you know who to punish today? You don't. So what is the only sane way to proceed? Well, the only sane way to proceed is to stop punishing everybody, stop tormenting everybody, and just say, okay, you're forgiven, because we have no idea. We have no idea. Why would we have a war? Why? Like, are you sure that you're right? Based on what? Based on what they did 60 years ago? How do you know that wasn't you? So, I mean, somebody showed up here 2 millennia ago saying, look, the way through this is forgiveness. Obviously, that's the way you have to do it. There's no other. Obviously, you have to forgive. That's the only way, looking for some sort of reparations or, stratifying who gets punished more. I mean, that's absurd. So you start there, and then you realize that, okay, we're reincarnating. Uh-oh, what are we going to do about our foreign policy or the planet, or, how do we preserve our environment? Is it just, for when I get older, I'll have, I can pay for my heating bill? Or are you going to look 7 generations down the line? Or
yeah, I really like that, Madhava, in your talk when you said we wouldn't poison the river if we think we're going to come back in 100 years.
Yeah, it's like, you can say, oh, I care about my grandchildren and their children. Well, what about if it was you? Don't you think that would make a difference? I think it would. I think we would change completely how we would run the planet. We would forgive everybody, and we would make sensible decisions about everything, because it's going to be us that eats the fruit of our actions or suffers the repercussions of our mistakes. That's the first thing. So the point here is that you don't have to know that you reincarnate. Let's just pretend. What is the downside of pretending that we're reincarnating? I can't think of one other than, oh my goodness, I'm if I do that and forgive everybody and not try to maximize pleasure and things, I might miss out on something in the next 20 years. And we can all understand that we don't leave here with the things that we have accumulated. So what's the point anyway? So it's insane not to at least behave that way, is what I'm saying. Like, why can't we at least agree that that's the smarter way of doing things? That's all I'm saying. I don't have to prove it to you, but shouldn't our intellect point us in that direction at least, or at least give it an open consideration?
Yeah,
and so
I found it, sorry to jump in, I found it interesting that you just introduced the concept, because usually it's not being talked about. Maybe here in Switzerland, it's not being talked. I don't know about the US, but like, people don't, meet on the street and talk about reincarnation all the time. And when you talked about it in your 9/11 lecture, I was going like, gee, Madhava is talking about reincarnation. And I was always like unsure, is there reincarnation? Is there not reincarnation? And the playful way that you put it forward really appealed to me, because when you said, could be, I don't know, maybe, but let's just assume, and then what would follow? And it really would follow more peaceful coexistence. It would
yes,
follow naturally for
it
me.
would.
Sorry for
Yes.
interrupting. Sorry for jumping in.
No,
But I wanted to thank you for bringing it up. That's what I wanted to say.
And could I comment on it briefly? Thank you also very much. Yeah, we don't talk about it really in the United States to speak of. I actually traveled last fall to Bhutan, Nepal, and Tibet, and learned a lot about the Buddhist practices of the region, and they talk about reincarnation all the time.
I know,
Yeah.
it's a cultural thing, right?
It's a given for them. But here's the thing. Yeah, I just want to push back a little. The notion that if people actually were to believe that, yes, I will come back and the future world is something that I'm going to experience, I don't think that's necessarily the motivation for everyone. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I never thought about reincarnation. It was never anything I believed. And if people mentioned it in my earlier years, I thought, yeah, that's interesting, but it's kind of a crazy idea. Of course it's not. I just sort of assumed it wasn't possible. That was my mindset. In more recent years, I'm sort of open to considering things. But all these years when I assumed reincarnation was not really a thing and not a possible, I still felt within me this very fervent desire to have a world that is going to be better for the future generations. And even for people today, people don't always behave because they want benefits or comfort for themselves. They literally do behave because doing something that makes another person's life better makes my life better too. I think people do have that altruistic tendency. So yes, of course, I want the world to be better for my children and grandchildren, but I'm never going to know my great and my great great grandchildren or those of my neighbors in other countries. But I do sincerely, fervently want the world to be better for them. And I do think it's important to forgive. So I think the concept of reincarnation could be motivating for some, but not necessarily for everybody.
Yeah.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. And there's so many things. This is such an interesting conversation. And how are we doing on time, by the way? Because I want to make sure that
yeah, we could go for another 5 minutes or so. So please go ahead.
You wanted to comment on the attention span,
and you wanted to
I
talk
know,
about 5 or 10 minutes. We can manage. So go ahead, Madhava.
You guys keep throwing in such interesting things. I don't want to go back to attention now. Now it doesn't seem so important. So two things about this. Yes, it's not motivating for everybody. But however, there's some interesting deficits to the reincarnation thing. And the biggest thing is when you start saying, oh, I'm coming back again. So, what's the big deal? Now that has taken away from your motivation to actualize something now, right? So you have to be very careful. Like simply accepting the idea that, we're only in a tiny chapter of an infinite library right now in this lifetime, that will tend to make you less motivated to act. And this has been used against people in my society in India with a caste system. People are just like, oh, your job is to clean latrines for the rest of your life. So don't worry about it. You're coming back and, you'll be selling cigarettes your next, lifetime. And so that has kept people entrenched in their way of, behaving. So we have to be very careful that we don't take away from our motivation to actualize change. However, on the flip side is here we are, the age-old question, why is there evil in this planet? Why are good people, being punished? Why do they end up being born with disabilities? And we don't have an answer to that question because we look at it as this is one life and that's all you have. But when you start to say, oh my goodness, this is a, one chapter in an enormous book, and you're only seeing a tiny fragment of this person's soul evolution, suddenly now you can accept the idea that, oh, there could be a meaning to this. This could be a trajectory that this person is on over multiple lifetimes. But yet we're like, oh no, I'm just going to stick with the idea that, there is no God and there's no sense to the world. And somehow that seems to suffice for some people. But the reality is when you look at the fact that we're, transcendent beings, this can explain a lot of our puzzles that we're having right now. So I'll say that. Attention. This is amazing that you brought it up because that is, in fact, the proof that we're evolving. And I had mentioned before that we were in a situation where we were physically subjugated in the past, but now it is about entrapping us in the way we think. Imagine 40 years ago, before there were smartphones and before there was internet, and someone came up to you and said, look, I'm working on an invention and this is how it works. I'm not going to tell you how it works, but this is the result. I can command the attention of not just you and me and the people in this room. I can command the attention of literally millions of human beings. I'm not, I can do it. And, you'd sit there and say, well, how are you possibly going to do that? And can we have acknowledged at that time, holy cow, that would be a very, very potent tool and weapon. That's what we have today. We have, like, people are walking around, fixed with this influx of thought forms. This is, in my opinion, the sign that this is how it works. We've moved away from fighting with our fists. Now we're fighting with this. And what is an amazing tool? It's like, oh, I'm going to capture your attention and dictate to you how I want you to respond to what I'm doing. This is an enormous, it's not just a weapon, it's also a tool. We have to understand that. So that's, I'm going to finish with this statement, which is, when we approach our, say, adversaries we have to confine them or attack them or kill them, this is actually the manifestation of a manner of regarding what is happening, in the sense that I view, like, the Dick Cheneys and the Don Rumsfelds and everybody here, except for us three, we're puppets. They're puppets. They're following a certain programming. And who are the puppeteers? And this is where we have to look a little more deeply. Like, what exactly, who could be controlling them? Would they be at this level? Or are they, are they aliens that are, controlling the strings? I don't know. But I think a very interesting way of examining this is that we have actually light and dark energy at a very high level that is dancing with each other. And the need to control is what we often attribute to evil. Like, we can say that Donald, whoever did 9/11 is evil. Or we can say, look, those guys, whoever are the orchestrators, they're the ones that are seeking to control. They look upon everything outside of them as not them. And so they have the free reign to control everything out there. Most people regard each other as, oh no, we're part of the human family, as Daniela said. I love you. And when you do better, I do better. And when I do better, you do better. Like, let's move together and love each other. But not everybody thinks that way. When we say, oh, everybody wants it, not everybody. And those people who don't think that way are an important part of this mystery that we're in, that we're dancing with. And so my point here is how, if you are let's say, an agent of control that's operating at a very, very deep level, metaphysically, how do you control large amounts of people? Well, I would suggest that you get them to embody the puppet. Make them think that they're here fighting it out with, the other people, in whatever, format there is. It's like we're against those people. That is a way of bringing us down in our energy level to, oh, we're just, we're this meat suit, and we have to fight, and we only have this much to live, and we're this desperate struggle to maintain our liberty. That's the way they actually work. They want us to say, oh yeah, go after Dick Cheney, go after, G.W. Bush or whomever, Netanyahu, Putin, whoever you think is the enemy. They want you to embody the puppet. And I would suggest, if we really want to find a way through this, we have to embody the puppeteer. We have to dance with them at a very, very deep level, and regard the entire situation as light and dark that exist together. There isn't, I don't like the word evil. I look at it more as someone who is absolutely dedicated to service to self. That's who they are. And how do you do jujitsu with people who are looking to control? Well, you have to be very, very careful, because you don't want to embody the negative energy of, like, reactivity and anger. You have to sort of say, okay, I get where you're coming from. That's what you want. And you have the freedom to do that, but you don't have the freedom to control me. And I will stand up when I think it's necessary. And your greatest enemy is me, because I know how to convince people of what's going on, because that is what is going to cause their downfall. And so that's why conversations like this are so absolutely important right now, because we get to step away from the material and look at what's going on behind it. And I really appreciate you bringing us together, Marilyn.
Thank you, Madhava. Yeah, well, we're getting about to the end of our allotted time. I just want to give you each a chance. Any final comments before we close it out? Daniele, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Marilyn, first for organizing this. I want to thank Ted Walter behind the scenes for organizing this. I want to thank Madhava, because I think it's important for us in the peace movement to be really philosophical about the whole situation. If we just analyze World Trade Center 7 or USS Liberty 1967 or Pearl Harbor 1941 or Gulf of Tonkin 1964 and so on, we come to a position where we realize as human beings that there are lies and that there is violence. It's always these two, lies and violence. And when they're combined, lies and violence combined, it makes us very sad.
Yeah.
As human beings, we do watch movies where lies and violence feature, but we like to have the control to switch it off and say, well, it was just a movie. That way we can handle it, and that way we like it. But if it hits us or if it hits our family or friends, we really don't like lies and violence.
Mm-hmm.
And I studied lies and violence as a historian, focusing on covert action and special operation forces and secret services for a long time. So I want to really stress how important it is for people who are new in the field and realize there's a lot of lies, there's a lot of violence, that they also see the good side of things. Okay. And I think that philosophical debate that we had here today, or debate exchange, stresses the good side. And the good side, or the good news, is that I think human beings are wonderful beings. I know we can go into violence. I know we can go into hate and division. But as Madhava said, and as you, Marilyn, said, we also have the potential to understand that we're interconnected, all of us. There's nobody really alone. I know that some people say, that's not true. He doesn't know how I feel. On a really, really very profound truth, we're all interconnected. And even if we leave the body, I think, and that is now based on my near-death experience reading and not on my personal experience, but I think that consciousness lives on. And so I think all this fear-mongering of, you could have been killed on 9/11, so you have to give, a few billion to the Pentagon, and you have to agree that we attack Iraq, and you have to agree to torture on Guantanamo. I always go like, no, I don't agree. Because they always scare us with this, your body could have been killed. And I think with the corona story, it was the same thing. A virus can kill you, therefore you have to agree to this and that and this and that, and then take away our liberties. And I'm going like, no, I don't agree. And so the positive thing, and I wrap it up there, is really that I think we're one human family, and we're all interconnected, and on a really profound level, I think that this connection is love. I think it cannot be destroyed by all these warmongers. And I think more and more people wake up to this, and therefore I want to conclude and thank you both for this exchange across the Atlantic. It was a pleasure. Madhava, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, great closing statement, Danielle, and thank you for letting me conclude. This is what I want to say. We agree that we're all conscious, I believe, mainly. But if we start there, we run into the problem of, but we all disagree. What are we going to do? Like, nobody sees it the same way. So what I would suggest is this. The way through it is to exercise your ability to recognize your own biases. What is it that makes you prejudge a situation? that was basically the essence of the book that I wrote 5 years ago when I was trying to convince my engineering friends that they're looking at 9/11 wrong. I'm like, oh my gosh, the reason why you don't see it is that you're biased. You jump to a conclusion without actually listening to what I'm saying, right? So imagine that you were with somebody who you don't have any biases and they don't have any biases, right? You're just awareness. And you are confronted with a piece of information and you're trying to understand, is it valid? How valid is it? If you have no biases, how would you ever disagree? You may be able to say, well, I know more about the subject, so I have less uncertainty about it than you do because you have no idea about structural engineering or virology. You would be able to say, look, I'm as an engineer, I'm pretty sure that this is right. And you as a non-engineer can say, well, I just simply don't know, but I can't disagree with you. There's no reason for me to jump to the conclusion that you're wrong. So we would construct a collective that would not be fundamentally in disagreement. If we can eliminate all of our biases, we would all converge on a universal understanding of what's going on. It's going to take time, but we have to address the distortions in our cognition first. It's absolutely essential. Otherwise, we're always going to be separated. But if we can stop and say, oh yeah, well, there's no reason for me to disagree with you actually, because I don't know enough. And I know I'm being pushed into getting vaccinated or, supporting Guantanamo Bay, but I don't have to do that. And I'm jumping to that conclusion because, it was my prejudice around fear. So notice that actually is a irrepressible movement that we're having once we can start saying, oh, that's the way through. That's actually what we have to do. Before we can convince them, we have to look at our own self first. So that's a note of positivity because I believe that's a solution. It's potentially a solution. And finally, I would conclude with, let's not take ourselves so seriously. And I would suggest seeking out comedy and humor and finding a really, really good joke. And it's I'm not being flippant. I'm saying this is a very important part of our intelligence is to recognize humor. And if you stop and ask yourself, why exactly am I laughing? When I heard that, why? Like I'm not joyful. I'm not ticklish. Why am I laughing? Well, if you stop and really consider what just happened, the moment that person hit you with a punchline, what happened? Well, the reason why you're laughing is that you had a sudden realization, like, oh my God, I was wrong the whole time. I was thinking that the story was going this way, but boom, you hit me with the truth that it was right in front of me and I couldn't see it. And the best jokes are the ones that you don't see coming. And so the reason why I think this is important is because it brings you instantly to a state of humility. You didn't see it. Do you understand? You didn't see it coming. So let's, back off and say it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be fooled. And isn't it great when you understand how it all fits together now and you didn't see it right in front of you? The pattern was there, but no, you were disillusioned by some kind of, bias, let's say. So, my advice to people is to learn to tell one or two really good jokes and keep working on it and try and laugh as much as you can.
Laughter is the best medicine, as they say. But thank you for these wonderful concluding remarks, Madhava, and also Daniele for reminding us about the power of love that can really change things as well for all of us. So we're really out of time now. I'll call it an end, but hopefully we can have another conversation at a future date. I want to thank you both, Daniele and Madhava, for being with us today. In the show notes, we'll include links to the various books you've written, to your websites, YouTube channel, Substack, all that sort of thing, so that if the viewers want to get more information about you, they'll know where to find it. Again, this is a program by the International Center for 9/11 Justice. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.